For decades, rumors circulated about a secret program hidden deep inside the files of the United States intelligence community, a program so controversial that many believed it was only a conspiracy theory. Stories claimed that the government had experimented with ways to influence the human mind, that scientists working in secret laboratories tried to discover whether thoughts, memories, and behavior could be altered under controlled conditions. For years, these stories sounded impossible. But in the 1970s, during investigations into intelligence activities conducted during the Cold War, fragments of classified documents began to appear. Those documents confirmed that the rumors were not entirely fiction. There had indeed been a secret project, a program designed to explore the limits of human psychology. It was called MK-Ultra. To understand why this program existed, it is necessary to return to one of the most tense periods in modern history, the Cold War. After World War II ended in 1945, the world quickly divided into two powerful rival blocs. On one side stood the United States and its allies. On the other side stood the Soviet Union and the countries aligned with it. Both sides believed the other was developing dangerous technologies, secret weapons, and new methods of intelligence gathering. The fear of falling behind pushed governments to explore ideas that, under normal circumstances, might never have been considered. During this time, intelligence agencies became obsessed with one disturbing question. What if the human mind itself could become a battlefield? In the early years of the Cold War, American intelligence officers began hearing disturbing reports from around the world. Captured soldiers returning from conflicts sometimes described strange interrogation experiences. Some claimed they had been subjected to intense psychological pressure, isolation, or unusual methods designed to break their resistance. These reports raised fears inside the intelligence community. Officials worried that rival nations might be developing advanced psychological techniques capable of extracting secrets from prisoners or influencing human behavior in ways that were not yet fully understood. Whether these fears were exaggerated or not, they created a powerful sense of urgency. If such techniques existed, the United States believed it could not afford to remain unaware of them. Understanding the human mind suddenly became more than a scientific question. It became a matter of national security. Inside the Central Intelligence Agency, discussions began about launching a research effort that could explore the limits of psychology, behavior, and perception. The goal was not only to understand how the mind could be influenced, but also how American agents could resist similar techniques if they were ever captured by hostile forces. What started as a defensive concern soon evolved into something much larger. A classified program designed to explore psychological influence under controlled experimental conditions. In 1953, the Central Intelligence Agency officially launched a new classified research initiative. The program received the codename MK-Ultra. The responsibility for overseeing the project was given to a scientist within the CIA named Sidney Gottlieb, a chemist known for his unconventional thinking and willingness to explore unusual scientific ideas. Under his supervision, MK-Ultra would grow into a network of research projects involving universities, laboratories, and independent researchers. Many of these researchers did not even realize they were contributing to a CIA program. Instead, they believed they were participating in studies related to psychology, medicine, or behavioral science. The structure of MK-Ultra was intentionally complex. Rather than operating as a single project, it was divided into many smaller studies known as sub-projects. Each one focused on different aspects of human behavior. Some explored memory. Others focused on perception, stress, or psychological pressure. Because the program was highly classified, only a small number of people inside the CIA understood the full scope of the research. To most outsiders, the experiments appeared to be ordinary academic studies. But behind the scenes, they were part of a much larger effort to understand how the human mind responded to extreme conditions. And as the years passed, the program would expand far beyond its original goals. As the MK-Ultra program began to expand during the 1950s, the CIA quietly funded dozens of research efforts across the United States and abroad. These projects were designed to explore one central question: How does the human mind react under extreme psychological conditions? At first, many of the studies appeared harmless. Universities conducted experiments on perception, stress, memory, and behavior. Scientists examined how sleep deprivation affected concentration. Others studied how isolation could change the way people processed information. On paper, these experiments looked like normal psychological research. But hidden behind the academic language was a deeper objective. Intelligence officials wanted to know whether human behavior could be influenced in predictable ways. If the mind could be pushed toward confusion, compliance, or emotional vulnerability, it might become easier to extract information from captured agents. At the same time, the CIA hoped these studies would reveal how American personnel could resist such pressure if they were ever interrogated by enemy forces. To pursue these questions, the agency created an unusually large network of research partnerships. Hospitals, universities, and laboratories received funding for behavioral studies. Some researchers knew they were working with government agencies. Others believed they were simply conducting scientific research supported by private grants. The secrecy surrounding MKUltra ensured that very few people understood the full scope of what was happening. As the research continued, the program became increasingly ambitious. Scientists working within MKUltra began exploring different environmental conditions that could influence the mind. One area of interest involved sensory deprivation. Researchers discovered that when people were isolated from normal sensory input, such as light, sound, or physical interaction, the brain sometimes reacted in unpredictable ways. Participants placed in quiet, dark environments for extended periods reported confusion, anxiety, and altered perceptions of time. Other studies examined how prolonged stress or exhaustion could affect decision-making. When individuals were pushed beyond their normal limits, their ability to concentrate and resist suggestion sometimes weakened. For intelligence agencies, these discoveries raised important questions. If certain environments could change how the brain processed information, could those environments also influence behavior? Could a person's resistance be reduced under specific psychological conditions? These questions drove further experimentation. Researchers continued to investigate how different combinations of stress, isolation, and psychological pressure affected the human mind. However, because MKUltra operated under strict secrecy, most of these experiments were never discussed publicly. Only fragments of the research were recorded in documents that would remain hidden for many years. By the late 1950s, MKUltra had grown into one of the most complex intelligence research programs ever created by the CIA. More than 100 sub-projects had been established under the MKUltra umbrella. Each one focused on different aspects of psychology, chemistry, and behavioral science. Some projects investigated how emotions influenced decision-making. Others explored how fear or uncertainty could affect memory and perception. The diversity of the research reflected the CIA's broader objective, understanding the full range of factors that could influence human behavior. To maintain secrecy, many of the projects were disguised as independent academic studies. Funding was often delivered through intermediary organizations, making it difficult to trace the money back to the CIA. Even researchers who were directly involved in the experiments sometimes did not realize the true origin of their funding. This system allowed MKUltra to operate quietly for years. While the public remained unaware, intelligence officials continued collecting data from dozens of experiments scattered across research institutions. Each study added another piece to a growing body of knowledge about the limits of human psychology. But as the program expanded, so did the questions surrounding how far these experiments should go. And within the classified world of intelligence research, those limits were not always clearly defined. As MKUltra expanded through the late 1950s and early 1960s, the research began moving into more complex areas of psychology and human behavior. The central question remained the same. How could different conditions influence the way people think, remember, and make decisions? Scientists working within the program began studying how powerful emotional states could affect the human mind. Fear, stress, confusion, and exhaustion were all considered important variables. Researchers believed that if they could understand how these conditions affected the brain, they might learn how to weaken resistance during interrogations or protect intelligence agents from similar psychological pressure. Some studies examined how people reacted when placed under prolonged stress. Participants were asked to complete demanding tasks while experiencing sleep deprivation or constant psychological pressure. The results showed that extreme fatigue could reduce concentration and affect decision-making. In other experiments, researchers explored the effects of isolation. When individuals were separated from normal social contact for extended periods, many experienced changes in mood, perception, and emotional stability. These findings suggested that the environment surrounding a person could strongly influence their mental state. For intelligence agencies, this raised an important possibility. If psychological pressure could alter how the mind worked, it might also influence how information was processed, remembered, or revealed. Another area of research focused on the role of perception and suggestion in human behavior. Psychologists involved in MKUltra explored how expectations, authority, and environmental cues could shape the way people interpreted reality. Under certain circumstances, individuals were more likely to accept information or instructions without questioning them. This phenomenon had already been studied in earlier psychological research, but intelligence officials believed it could have practical applications. If people became more receptive to suggestion under specific conditions, it might become easier to guide their responses during questioning. Researchers experimented with different environments designed to influence a participant's emotional state. Lighting, sound, physical comfort, and even the tone of voice used by researchers were carefully adjusted. These subtle changes sometimes produced noticeable shifts in how participants reacted to questions or instructions. The experiments suggested that human perception was more flexible than previously believed. People often interpreted situations differently depending on the context surrounding them. For intelligence agencies studying interrogation techniques, this discovery was considered extremely valuable. It suggested that the psychological environment could play a major role in shaping a person's reactions and responses. As the research continued, MKUltra expanded beyond traditional psychological studies. Scientists began examining how chemistry and biology could interact with the human brain. The goal was to understand how certain substances might affect perception, awareness, and emotional responses. Researchers believed that studying these effects could provide insights into how the mind processed information under unusual conditions. During the Cold War, this line of research attracted significant attention within intelligence circles. Both the United States and its rivals were interested in whether chemical compounds could influence cognition or behavior. Within MKUltra, scientists conducted controlled laboratory studies to observe how different substances interacted with the brain. Participants were monitored carefully as researchers recorded changes in mood, perception, and cognitive performance. These experiments were often carried out in medical or research environments that appeared similar to ordinary scientific studies. To outside observers, they looked like normal laboratory work. But inside the classified world of intelligence research, they represented another attempt to understand the complex relationship between chemistry and the human mind. The results of these studies would later become some of the most widely discussed aspects of the MKUltra program. For many years, the MKUltra program remained hidden behind layers of secrecy. Inside the intelligence community, the research continued quietly while the public remained completely unaware that such a program existed. But by the late 1960s and early 1970s, the political climate in the United States was beginning to change. The country was experiencing a period of growing skepticism toward government institutions. Several major political events had shaken public trust, and journalists began investigating previously secret activities carried out during the Cold War. As reporters and investigators started asking questions about intelligence operations, pressure began to build around government transparency. Some officials inside the intelligence community grew concerned that classified programs might eventually become public. Within the CIA, discussions began about how to manage sensitive records connected to earlier research projects. During this period, decisions were made that would later make it extremely difficult to fully understand the scope of MKUltra. In 1973, many files connected to the program were destroyed. The order reportedly came from senior leadership within the CIA. Boxes of documents describing experiments, funding structures, and research results were eliminated before they could be examined by outside investigators. Because of this destruction, historians today believe that large portions of the MKUltra story may never be completely known. Despite the destruction of many records, some documents survived. These remaining files eventually reached investigators who were examining intelligence activities during the Cold War. In 1975, the United States Senate launched a major investigation known as the Church Committee, named after Senator Frank Church. The purpose of the investigation was to examine the activities of intelligence agencies and determine whether certain programs had gone beyond acceptable limits. During the hearings, investigators uncovered references to MKUltra. The discovery surprised many members of Congress. Until that moment, most lawmakers had never heard of the program. As researchers and intelligence officials were questioned, details about the project slowly began to emerge. The hearings revealed that the CIA had funded a large number of psychological and behavioral studies over several decades. Because so many records had already been destroyed, investigators struggled to determine the full number of experiments that had been conducted. However, it became clear that MKUltra had involved a wide network of institutions and researchers. Universities, hospitals, laboratories, and private organizations had all participated in studies connected to the program. For the first time, the existence of MKUltra was being discussed openly in front of the public. As the investigation continued, more information about the structure of MKUltra became public. Lawmakers learned that the program had been divided into numerous sub-projects, each focusing on different aspects of psychology, behavior, and environmental influence. Some of these studies had taken place in academic institutions that had received government funding. Others were conducted in medical research facilities. Because the funding often passed through intermediary organizations, tracing the connections between the CIA and the research projects was not always straightforward. Investigators also discovered that the program had been active for more than 2 decades. During that time, it had supported a wide variety of scientific studies related to human behavior and perception. The hearings raised important questions about oversight and accountability. Many members of Congress wondered how such a large and complex program had been allowed to operate for so long without broader supervision. Although the investigation revealed many details about MKUltra, the missing documents meant that some questions remained unanswered. Even today, historians and researchers continue examining the surviving records in an attempt to reconstruct the full history of the program. By the time the investigations ended in the mid-1970s, the public had learned something unsettling. For more than 20 years, a secret intelligence program had quietly explored the limits of human psychology. The surviving documents showed that MKUltra had involved more than 100 separate research efforts spread across universities, laboratories, hospitals, and private institutions. Because many of the original files had been destroyed, investigators were forced to reconstruct the program using scattered records and testimonies from people who had been involved. Even with these limitations, the picture that emerged was striking. The program had attempted to understand how stress, environment, perception, and chemistry could influence the way the human mind functioned. During the Cold War, intelligence agencies believed that understanding these mechanisms could help them protect national security and defend against potential psychological threats from rival nations. But the revelations also raised important questions. How much secrecy should intelligence programs be allowed to maintain? And who should be responsible for supervising research that operates behind classified doors? These questions became part of a larger national conversation about the balance between security and oversight. MKUltra had become a symbol of how far governments might go when operating under extreme geopolitical pressure. In the years that followed the investigation, new rules were introduced to increase oversight of intelligence activities. Government agencies were required to report certain operations to congressional committees responsible for supervising intelligence programs. These changes were designed to ensure that large classified projects could not continue indefinitely without review. Historians studying the Cold War often point to MK Ultra as an example of how intense geopolitical competition influenced scientific research. During that era, both superpowers feared that the other side might develop revolutionary technologies capable of changing the balance of power. This atmosphere of suspicion and urgency encouraged governments to explore unconventional ideas. Within that environment, intelligence agencies supported research into areas that might otherwise have remained purely academic. Psychology, behavioral science, and neuroscience suddenly became fields with potential strategic importance. The legacy of MK Ultra therefore extends beyond the program itself. It reflects a moment in history when the boundaries between science, intelligence, and national security became deeply intertwined. Understanding that context helps explain why such an unusual research program was allowed to develop in the first place. Today, MK Ultra remains one of the most discussed intelligence programs of the 20th century. Researchers continue examining the surviving records in order to understand exactly what happened and how the program evolved over time. Because many documents were destroyed, the complete story may never be fully known. Yet the fragments that remain offer a rare glimpse into the mindset of intelligence agencies during one of the most tense periods in modern history. The Cold War pushed governments to explore ideas that seemed both innovative and controversial. Programs like MK Ultra were born from the belief that knowledge about the human mind could become a strategic advantage. Decades later, the story continues to fascinate historians, journalists, and audiences around the world. Not only because of the mystery that still surrounds the program, but also because it raises a timeless question. When nations compete for power and security, how far are they willing to go in the pursuit of knowledge? The answer to that question may explain why MK Ultra remains such a powerful and debated chapter in the history of intelligence.